Yes, welcome back. This is F for Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, I want to know who you believe in through your funny reasons. If you've not picked up on it, you already know from the thumbnail, from the logo that you see right here. One of the last times that you're going to see these Plates and Crates logos used in these episodes, we are talking about none other than the 30-year-old classic 1993 by Naughty by Nature. This is category 2 where we go over the rap performance. And if you have not already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. Go visit the Rap Ruler, leave your rankings on the last episode, leave your ratings for this one. If you're streaming this right now, also go to the Rap Ruler. And with no further ado, we're going to jump right into it. First dimension that we talk about in category 2 is dimension 1, personality and charisma. All right, we're talking about a trio here. I know there's been a lot of buzz about what constitutes a group because every year someone comes out with some stupid hip hop list, which is part of why this channel exists. Most recently, it's been Billboard with their top 50 rap groups of all time. A lot of controversy, a lot of conversations online about it, but it sparked this sub-convo of do duos, trios, even countess groups, should they be pitted against fuller groups of like 4 or 5? And this group is technically a trio, but they perform as a duo. The producer is the silent partner in the background. And we've seen other versions of groups where the DJ is not even the producer, so the active part is not that active. In this case, you have 2 personalities on the mic, 1 lead and 1 secondary. And so Vinny, his presence on this album is very minimal. You'll hear Vinny say that he is more of the business mind behind the group, and that might be true, but I think on the first album he was seen as more of a hype man. And so what happens here is Vinny only appears on 4 tracks on this album, which is an increase from previous albums. And when he's present, it serves to kind of bolster this idea of Naughty being a crew. I think one thing that Naughty was always good at is establishing that they're a crew backed by many, if not just backed by their immediate posse, backed by the whole Ill Town, backed by Flavor Unit, and in a lot of cases backed by all of Jersey. They were big on that, and it was always pretty understood in their music. And so there's a lot of we talk when Vinny comes on as much as there's I talk. He's talking about what I'm doing, right? He adds to that, and I think that's where it begins and ends. I don't know if you get a fair assessment of who Vinny is when he appears, since he's on such limited amount of songs, and even when he's on, they're rarely full verses. They're split verses with Treach. I think Take It to Your Face and It's On might be the only 2 songs where Vinny gets a full verse to himself, and I don't even think those are 16-bar verses. So he mirrors the same aggression that Treach comes with, a lot of the same points. He deviates. He's the one that disses Sir Mix a lot on his verse, and he makes references to things like, we're taking it back, like when you used to get jacked for fat laces on your sneakers. Not a lot of difference, but you can tell they're not homogenous, and I think a lot of that might have to do with the visual, so that's a little cheating there. Visually, when you see Treach and Vinny, you know they're different off the bat. So even if they don't sound very different in what they're talking about, their voices are different, stature and presentation wise. And we talk about Treach and his personality and charisma on the mic. He is one of the 90s prime examples of somebody who was stage ready. Treach approaches everything he does performatively as if he was meant to be there. He was born to do this. He was a performer from the get-go. Any of you who have ever seen him in any of his film roles knows he just kind of takes to it. It reminds me of the way that DMX was a natural. You can tell these are people that didn't have to go to classes and study very hard. Treach is intentional and knows how to convey every point he wants to make. He's a very animated rapper without sacrificing the seriousness, which is not an easy feat. So I want to stop right here and give Treach major props for being able to be one of the few animated rappers that do so without going into this cartoonish space, especially at the speed he does it. It's reminiscent of, you can put Tech 9 in that same batch, even though physically, image-wise, Tech 9 may do some stuff that people consider to be cartoonish or out there and animated in that kind of way. On wax, he has control of everything that he's doing. So with Treach, he's going to use humor, he's going to use force, and he's going to use smoothness. And we'll talk more about this when we get into the delivery section, but he's hitting you with all of these dynamic elements of who he is and how he wants you to see him. And he puts it across, and there is a tenacity there and an oomph that makes it like, oh, he means this from the gut. Like, this is who he is. He's not taking it off. Especially you couple that with this idea from our category 1 review of this episode, this idea that they don't want to be mistaken as soft, and they want you to know this is about the crudiness. It's pretty much what Method Man did throughout his entire career, going against what he was at risk of being typecasted for. He's like, no, I'm going to show you I'm grimy forever. And this is what I prefer. It's what Treach did. So they're parallel in that sense, and you hear that in every track. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 2, where we talk about suspension of disbelief versus believability. All right. It's not a concept album. There's no alter egos here or characters being presented. This is Naughty saying that they are naughty. They are from this part of Jersey. They make a street music because they're from the streets. So the question is, as always, how much does Naughty by Nature make us believe them on this album? How believable are they? Well, let's consider what they're talking about. They're talking about stepping to beef, taking it to sucker MCs, not falling for gold diggers, women that want to get married, R&B divas that are too highfalutin. Anybody could get it. And this is verbally, this is physically. Very little talk about wiping people out with firearms, surprisingly. It's a lot of talk about physically doing damage to people. So an amazing feat for such hardcore hip hop, now that I think about it, right? You're not hearing anybody talk about that kind of physicality on this album except for the guests. Ironically, Freddie Fox talks about the caliber. Heavy D says something about, the trigger or something, but Treach not so much. Treach mentions it. He's not above it, but it's not his go-to. And so it's very minimal here on Treach's part. And the violence described here is going to be more hand-to-hand, pugilistic. And then the braggadocious claims are not past the grounded level. They are, even when Treach is talking about money, he's talking about it in a very civilian way. Like, look, I earned my money the right way. I saved it. I'm responsible with it. I pay my taxes. I pay my dues to get here. There's not money flaunting. There's not all of that talk. Because again, the emphasis is on how grimy, street cruddy they could be. And when talking about women, it's bragged about with a level of responsibility and choosiness and honesty, right? He's like, look, I'm not the one to marry, but I might carry Mariah. Or look, if you don't want to get with it, all you got to do is tell me from the jump. There's no need in fronting. You can hit the door. This is what I'm on. This is what I'm about. And hey, when I'm not doing that, don't accuse me of that. So there's always a ironic level of responsibility when talking about, I run through a lot of women, but look, don't accuse me of that when I'm not doing that. And are you still down knowing that? So you're not getting these pimp tales, you're not getting these money tales. There's no private jets and champagne popping going on here. It's really about their block, their crew, their people, and anybody who's not with them getting rolled over. How believable is it? Well, history has shown that, Treach is about that action, and he lives up to what he says. If you're into looking up that kind of stuff, Treach is just as confrontational in person, in real life, as he is on the mic. And that's the extent of those claims. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, delivery. Now we're getting into it. All right, so I mentioned how Treach is showcasing these different aspects and wants to make sure you get it by the way that he's stating it. That's where the delivery comes in place. Treach manipulates his voice more than most rappers you can name in all of hip hop. If he wants to sound playful, if he wants to do a little of this, then he's gonna do that. He's gonna make his voice go high, he's gonna make it go low, he's gonna make it curl, he's gonna make it wrap around, he's gonna shout, he's gonna get playing with it. Like, there's just little pieces that I can just intersperse here throughout. You take a verse like how he chooses to end the first verse on Written on Your Kitten, where he goes, well, you're not hearing him do that with his voice many places on the album. Just like on this album, there's less of the amplified posse style ad-libs. Back! You hear it in a few spaces on this album because the style was dying out at the end of the early 90s, where it's like, money, back, all of that call and response kind of ad-lib style. You're not getting as much of that. What you will get a nice trade-off of are verses where Treach is really projecting. There's a rubber band snap quality to Treach's style, because it's like, deep breath, I'm going to get out as many words in this one breath as I can. Hey, you wouldn't really and his voice, again, in that is going to go up and down, wrap around, because it's a release and he's belting it out, he's pushing it out. But then you'll also get him doing sing-song cadences. And interestingly enough, I think he does like a freeway style cadence on his first verse, Take It to Your Face, where he comes in. And of course, this precedes Freeway, so, but it's a style that you associate more with Freeway's unorthodox delivery, because he's like, we about to pull your ass around. It's like the rhyme scheme is zigzagging, and the way he's delivering it is sing-songy, but not in this bounce pattern that you could follow easily with the ball, right? If I had the ball there, it wouldn't go it's like with exaggerated words dragged out. So interesting choices like that, as opposed to there's other tracks where he is doing more sing-songy, easy to follow. He's using his voice like a brass instrumentalist, as if it was like a trombone or a horn or sax with the different measures, right? He's really modulating himself. It's self-modulation is what Treach is doing. Vinny is more straightforward. Vinny is staccato style, and each of his lines have punch. There's a punchiness to how he delivers all this stuff, and he stops short on a lot of stuff where Treach will not, and we'll talk about that in the next dimension. But for now, this is all something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the delivery and use of voice. All right, dimension 4, the flow. Oh, I've tried in real detail to describe Treach's flow. It's one of the most unique, advanced flows in hip-hop, of all hip-hop. Again, go peep that Queen Latifah Black Rain episode, because it's like, he pinballs is the word that I use. He is going to do what a lot of rappers do when it comes to hollow rhymes and keeping the same rhyme scheme and using a lot of the same rhyming words before getting to the bar landing, right? So internal rhymes galore, but he's not just internally rhyming, he's ping-ponging the syllables. Tippy, tippy, pause, to emphasize the fact that I'm sneaking up on you, right? You know, like I said, he's not necessarily associated with the Iggity rappers, but he goes into it when he wants to accelerate. On the song Hot Potato with Freddie Fox, there's a point where he goes, the wicked, willy bully, bad and fully and surely bad, ready and really getting grabbed, the fat stacks and glad. He'll do that when he wants to really show off. Again, end of the early 90s, that was still a part of the showing off bag. Like if you start pushing the gas and go from 0 to 60 with your flow, then oh snap, you're doing something not a lot of rappers can do, even if it does contain some of that iggity in it. So he wouldn't rely on it, but he's not beyond pulling that out every now and then. But acceleration is the game. He's like watching a pro driver, like I'm shifting gears, I'll bring it back down. And he'll bring it back down when he wants to emphasize something. He'll do what a lot of rappers do, referencing pop songs or something on that same track, Hot Potato. He takes one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite 80s hits that most people don't know the name of, Too Hype, In Touch. At the end of his line, he goes, da, 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 can't believe that she said Treach. Like all these different elements of flow, mostly multi-syllabalistic internal rhymes, lots of cluster raps with words that match words right next to each other. So again, sometimes at the expense of the raps, we hear a lot of people do this with punchline setups where they'll say anything in the preceding rhyming line to get to the line that actually has the punch in it. But here, Treach does that with syllables. So he says, who's wet dry when Treach tried? Next time I'm gonna slide your wet wide, so step side. You know, you get a lot of moments like that just for the sake of rapping. His freedom with his flow is so hard to peg that there's an example of him using dactylic hexameter on the third verse of Daddy Was a Street Corner. That's the technical name of the triplet flow. And he's going out and then he deviates from that, goes back into more the standard pinball type flow, and it goes back to it again just to show you that he did it on purpose. It's not a fluke. He's really just showing off, and he'll do that. From One Man on One album, you're getting those sing-songy cadence type of flows that made Naughty by Nature famous on their early releases. You're getting this super projected rubber band snap, multi-syllables in one breath kind of approach. Then you're getting this style that I just mentioned, and then a few others, right? All with different voices and different vocal projections and inflection. I mentioned how Vinny is more staccato in nature, but just as it was brought up in other instances of Treach's pen being the culprit, the question does come up if Vinny wrote his raps or not. In 2013, where the group was going through their internal conflict, Treach went on record on some media outlets saying that Vinny has never written his raps, and it's all been Treach. Treach is the pen of the group, KG's the producer, and he questioned Vinny's role. I told you Vinny will go on record saying he's the business mind. You'll see Vinny historically being the one promoting the Naughty gear and any Naughty merch and things like that. So if we're to believe that and take that into account, and then if you add on the point I raised in the Queen Latifah episode, this idea of Treach being so masterful as a ghostwriter that he knows how to make slight adjustments to his own style to make it palatable and make it seem a little different for someone else, like Queen Latifah, who's not going to rap as rapidly as he is, or maybe even as ruggedly as he is. Same thing with Vin. It's like, let me add some more pause breaks in here so your style is a little distinct from my own, but a trained ear is going to hear that this just sounded like the portions of Treach's verse that he gave to Vinny. and the way that Vinny delivers it is why it may sound like it stops short at certain parts, where Treach might have kept rolling. I mentioned that Treach likes to roll his words together, right? This is Shamble, Flim Flam, you know, like when you think about the guest features on this album, you pair Treach with Freddie Fox, who is more straightforward and is not doing as many syllable plays and stacking as Treach is doing, and the voice is gruffer. It's a great contrast, because with Heavy D, it's someone that's right on par with Treach. He's coming at the same rate of rapid flow and flexibility and fluidity, and even with the content to a degree. So all these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the flow. Takes us to dimension 5, the wordplay and bar intent. Okay. Whew. I mean, Treach had some of the sharpest wit of the early 90s among his peers. It's there. What I will say is the ratio might be off. 70-30. 30% of the time you are going to get verses or moments where it's just filler rhymes for the sake of killing it and keeping that flow. Treach strikes me as someone who very much builds his raps after he builds his flow, or gets lost in his flow and has to make the words go, right? Or it's just about focus. Very much like my critique of Nas. When Nas is focused, he is one of the most dangerous on the mic. When he is unfocused, you're liable to get a hodgepodge of anything. So one of the worst examples of this is this first verse on The Hood Comes First. He gets a little lazy. From the first line, you kind of get an idea that he's not giving his all. If you ain't knew me, you don't know me. You could be a sign and couldn't show me. So a really lazy punchline right there. But then he, like I mentioned in the category 1 review, he uses blow twice with only like one line in between to separate. And then he gets really clever and says, since I'm the leader of the jump, they should call me Captain Kangaroo. If I anger you, here's a finger too. Put it somewhere warm and tight, leave it in all night, now you can't rhyme or walk right. But then said, I hate the way that some bring things, so when I see him, I'ma up and kick him in the ding ding. Kind of corny on the delivery side, and the way that was set up just to rhyme with the punch. This is the reverse version of that, because the punch wasn't as good. And so it's like, oh, it's not until the other verses where he really redeems himself. Like the way that he disses Roxanne Shante and Granddaddy IU, some of the most clever subliminal rap ever. When he says, you played post and boast, we came to roast. Are we even? If you still breathing, we ain't even close. IOU, which is a continuation from the are we even sentence, right? But then he says, drop the O. Matter of fact, drop your whole sugar-free flow, a reference to probably the only Granddaddy IU song that I can name besides Something New, which is sugar-free. You want to write a diss, you should have made it so we never know. Now we do, now you're through, the Flavor Crew is after you. Like, come on, man. He says, here and there's a horny girl back, getting back at rap, screaming she's the Mama Mac, licking cracks for tracks. There's only one Queen Latifah, that's that. Your days is 4 hours and the other 20 on your back. Now you wonder why you got jacked, because if you diss one member of the Flavor, the whole unit's coming back. Remember that or get trapped. So by the pack in black, hide your gat. Doesn't say her name once, but you get all the references. All right. I also find it interesting that the diss to Roxanne Shante about, which is a really clever way of saying this is how you spend your day, right? 4 hours this way and 20 hours that way, but it's a continuation of the original diss by KRS-One from The Bridge Is Over, where, you know, he said that infamously like harsh line about Roxanne Shante, that she's just a sex object. And so Treach continues that same smite towards her, which, you know, I'm sure some people will argue is misogynistic, but I don't use that word so freely. I reserve that for true cases of misogyny and misogynoir. In his diss to YZ, he gets clever enough to even have a poetical angle where he says, "A fight, pick a night, I'll pick tonight. You're so scrap broke, it seems you dream in black and white." A reference to YZ's videos being in a monochromatic tone. So, I mean, the level of cleverness is high. That stretch when he's on point, but if you take a verse like his second verse on Hot Potato, again, I think he gets lost in his flow or where he's trying to go, right? So old gold digger, dig some dirt, there you have it. Want a ring or a match, go get a carrot from a rabbit. Before I stab him for his lucky foot, hit him with a puffy hook, hit the hair, now look how lucky looks. Yeah. Hit him with a puffy hook, it's just like, that's just a rhyme with lucky foot. Even though it was clever to carry the carrot reference with the rabbit to the lucky foot, it was just like, okay. And then, when I smack you with a leather wig and make you suckers sway bald spots, chip chop, flip the hip hop, I chuckle, and couldn't knock boots with an MF and knuckle. It's like chip chop, flip the hip hop, smack you with a leather wig, make you suckers sway bald spots. It's like the offbeat references just to get the clever line. That's where the reaching starts. You compare that to what he did with Heavy D on Ready for Them, and from the beginning of his verse, he said, "We ain't round yet, that's the type of writer to get booed at a sound check. Check the rep of the nappy naughty treaches, I go all out, F it, just call me Exit." Wordplay. I'm on some next-ish, Nexus. You're next for breakfast, your back's for practice, and ass for ass kicks. And as for, so continuing on for as for to as for, I'm coming from the edge of the earth. I'm the only kid I know that was worse at birth. Everybody knew me was worse than curse. My first words, not me, spanked the effing nurse. If I was a Dr. Chill, I give you 6 months to live. I give you another 6 if you can't pay the bill. That's what we're talking about. So he uses homonyms and double entendre all the time. He uses imagery, as we established, because there's a line where the song's called Hot Potatoes, and he says something about Treach, eat your French fries. Cleverness. He also uses alliteration. There's a line where he's like, "You not regal, real," or something, right? So for every verse where there's a line like, "Ticky kitty taking tack, getting tricky, smacking packs," he comes back and has something a lot more focused, like that sequence he does on the third verse to Take It to Your Face, where he's like, "It's all your fault that this hard assault came up quick. Get ready, buddy, for an asphalt ass whip." So all of that sounded like wordplay of all your fault. This hard assault came up quick. Get ready, buddy, for an asphalt ass whip. It's intentional, paying attention to the way words coincide. The end of that verse, though, still trying to figure out if anybody knows who he's directing that portion to. There's a couple verses throughout the album where he's not doing subliminals with names involved, where it's a little harder to peg who he's talking about. On the third verse of The Only Ones, it sounds like he's talking about sleeping with someone's woman and then being mad about it. On the end of Take It to Your Face, that whole part at the end where he's talking about hanging you from your heels, you trying to judge somebody real with a phony baby photo, trick, you should have kept your braces, cause man, I would have had it, and close your squeaky mouth with a magnet, talking about sticking gobs of gum in your son's hair. Anybody who knows where that reference comes from, please leave it in the comments. Inform those of us that want to know. Inquiring minds would like to know who that was about. He also sticks to the metaphor on Daddy Was a Street Corner and says some poignant lines on there, like, "A daddy I never got to meet mine, so on Father's Day I take a rag and I shine up the street sign." Like, if you needed one line to really drive home the point of the title of the song, or let you know the reason why this is the song's title, That's your line right there. That metaphorical wordplay there. So there's wordplay all throughout the album, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. So that takes us to dimension 6, the overall quotability, punchlines, poetic wisdom. All right, you get a little bit of both because there's profundity in what Treach is doing on this mic with the lines that he wants certain parts to land on. Punchlines started becoming a big deal in this early 90s era of hip hop where they were dropped in obvious ways. Treach does both styles where he wants you to hear the obvious punchlines where even the beat will drop so you really catch it, like his verse on Hot Potato, his first verse where he says, "You fly high, I heard your tape, then flip the next side looking for the deaf side. You couldn't be all right if I erased your left side." Dope punchline, but very obvious right there, delivered for you to catch it right away. More subtle is like what he does with lines like tearing you out the frame like I'm ripping up the Mona Lisa, or this ain't got itch to do with shampoo, but watch your head and shoulders on Hip Hop Parade, right? So punchlines matter, and you're getting them in two different ways. On the poetic wisdom side, there's those moments of commentary. Moments, and I say moments because Treach doesn't stay there long. He makes a sentence or two, drops it for thought-provoking effect, and then goes wherever else he's gonna go. One of the standout examples of this is "We're legit as I can get," all the way down to the point where he says, "I say, oh how now, not now, but pal, I did my dirt when I did it so I wouldn't have to do it now." Simple, but profound. And not a lot of rappers say that kind of stuff, right? Or at least not as simplified. We've heard songs where people talk about, "I left that life alone," blah, blah, blah. But it's this idea of, yeah, you caught me just a little too late. You ain't got nothing on me. You'll hear similar stuff with the way he's describing the Rodney King riots. This is still 1 year removed from that being maybe one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing in the news. And so that's what a lot of rappers had to speak on the following year. And if we take into account that this album was put together mostly in 1992, it makes sense that that would be referenced a few times throughout the album. Even the way he talks about relationships on Sleepwalking 2, you know, the woman trying to hand him her demo while he's thinking we're getting it on, and she put herself in a position fronting like that's what she wanted too, just to get to that point. I think he characterized that really well. Like the exchange was written in a way where you could see it happening and you can hear, like I mentioned before, there's a level of responsibility in his whole shenanigans, for lack of a better word. It's like, yes, I'm this, but you know, you got to be down with the club. You got to, you know, there's some criteria to this. Again, I think a lot of it might be impacted detrimentally and affected by the fact that a lot of y'all, a lot of us, couldn't keep up with just how much Treach was saying. And there'd be a lot more to quote if we understood it. There's even lines from Hip Hop Parade that I'm just now understanding. I was saying the wrong words all my life. Yeah, their stance on Black women in particular in some of the lines sound like they're taking a protective position, like, hey, y'all got to be careful how y'all talk about Black women, even though they go on and have reckless moments or reckless songs. Like I said, there's always that responsible aspect to how Treach wants to approach it. So when you hear Vinny going at Sir Mix-a-Lot for the Baby Got Back song, and he's saying, that's why you see a Black woman and you respect that. Treach goes in his whole verse on Hip Hop Parade, that second verse is all about being accused of infidelity, right? When he addresses that on one of my favorite verses of all time, really, and breaks it down so masterfully, like a real conversation you would have, where he says, you said, I know you Mr. OPP, man. Yo, PP, man, won't only see me, man. You should have known when I ain't hit it a step that I was with it a bit, not to consider the rep. Heck, I did your partner because she's hot as a baker, because I'm naughty by nature, not because I hate you. Then he says, you put your heart in a part of a part that spreads apart and forgot that I forgave when you had a spark. You try to act like something really big is missing, even though my name's graffiti written on your kitten. I love black women always, and disrespect ain't the way. Let's start our family today. Hip hop array. Like, what? He puts all of that in this serious conversation of like, yo, yes, I'm a hoe, but you should have known that I wasn't going to be a hoe with you, and now your accusation is creating all this drama. But I love black women so much, let's not get toxic here. Let's start a family, which in its own sense could be toxic, right? But it's this idea that he's addressing all of that in just one verse on a song where he's on all three verses, and he takes that deviation. And so it might be considered that Naughty also wanted to make the songs that they made singles, because they did put that black woman piece in both It's On and Hip Hop Array. So while they may not have had the most memorable song for the women, it's like, oh, here are these pieces. And that's what I mean about this, pieces and bits of profound, kind of conscious, or I got a little bit more to me than just this aggressive braggadocio. All these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about either the punchlines or the poetic wisdom on this album and the overall quotability. All right, Dimension 7, the concepts. We've established this is not a concept album, and so now we're just talking about what songs dabble in conceptual territory. Are there concept songs here? There are, and they're not the tightest concepts, but they're also not the loosest concepts. Daddy Was a Street Corner being the most earnest song here that points you in a direction to really have to listen from an angle. Yes, it's a concept, but Treach is making more of a general commentary on being raised by the streets, that every verse doesn't have to be packed with all of these metaphorical references. Pretty much he just mentions the father street concept when he wants to, but mostly he's talking about what he does on the streets and what street life is like. And then here and there you'll get splashes like that street sign thing that I mentioned. The other song that goes into conceptual territory is Written on Your Kitten, and that's a lot looser than this one, but boy, Treach is committed to this kitten theme. And so all throughout the song is a bunch of puns and references to cat-like things, right? To the point where he even has a line about the dog catchers catching bees while I'm over here catching kittens, and that's why I prefer to go past, go pursue the cat. There's Kibbles and Bits references, catnap. The line that follows the Kibbles and Bits line is an example of one of those too overly animated and forced, pushed punchlines. But that anyone that hits it after me, that'll be a catastrophe. That's an effective, obvious punchline he wanted to make sure you heard. So in the commitment to the kitten theme, there's that conceptual, but it's not conceptual in any format that, oh, you have to listen from beginning to end to get it. Daddy Was a Street Corner. It's a little tighter. You kind of have to listen to all three verses to hear it tied together, but neither of these are like tightly packed where you have to like really hone in. It's just like, okay, loosely tied to the theme, at least there's a theme. So yeah, I'd say there's at least 2 concept songs on here, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats if you think they're strong, if you think they did what they needed to do and served a purpose. All right, that takes us to the content dimensions. Dimension 8, the externalized content. So topical stuff, I kind of broke this down in category 1, that there are no full songs that go into this kind of territory, but in verses 1 of The Only Ones and Daddy Was a Street Corner, that's where you get Treach talking about things outside of himself. Daddy Was a Street Corner, that first verse is talking about cops, the riots, and the relationship dynamics between people in the hood and the police. The Only Ones, that first one is about paying taxes, not being connected to the drug game, but being accused of it, making money legally, and people not wanting to see a black man advance in that manner, and fighting back again against the system, against the police, and against stereotype of rappers. Sleepwalking 2 is a middle ground because it is from an I perspective, but to another person, and it's speaking about a certain type of woman that is looking for a come up, but it's from Treach's vantage point. So the I language is used, but it's still commentary mostly on that type of woman trying to get that ladder climb, right? And then Written on Your Kitten is to the women that Treach is aiming to sleep with and his prowess in getting that accomplished. So middle ground there. The only dabbling that you get into Dimension 9, which is the internalized content, how much exposition, autobiographical, and feelings and emotion-based stuff you get from the rappers, is on Daddy Was a Street Corner, where Treach continues what he started on the previous album with Ghetto Bastard, Everything's Gonna Be Alright, talking about his own upbringing without his father, the absence of a father, and how the street life supplanted that and took its place, unfortunately. And he's speaking for the other kids who grew up in the same kind of situation and chose the same path. So it's a metaphor that is commentary on that kind of instance and situation. That's as close as you get, besides that verse in Hip Hop Array, where I say Treach is talking to this woman that he was making an honest attempt at being settled with and sharing his feelings about that. And then, I mean, in the braggadocio and the battling, you could say this is exposition because Treach is telling you where he stands, and so is Vinny, but that's a reach. Both of these things are something to consider when you're thinking about the content, externalized and internalized on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. And with that, we go to the final dimension, Dimension 10, storytelling on this album. Just like the social commentary is few and far between, you're getting that in the way that Treach describes the scenarios with women on Sleepwalking 2 and parts of Daddy Was a Street Corner. That's it. There's no direct story here. There's no one day I was doing this or this happened. It's fleeting. It's damn near non-existent. It is up to you to determine if that is a weakness or if that has no effect on the album whatsoever on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That concludes the Category 2 review of the classic album from Naughty by Nature, 1993. And with that, I bid you adieu. I want to remind you to go to the Rap Ruler to leave your rankings and ratings. I want to remind you to go cop a t-shirt. I want to remind you to go listen to this everywhere that podcasts are streamed. And on that note, y'all know what it is. Until next time, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to mouth. Peace.